So, up here on my pulpit, if any of you have ever ventured up to see, you'll see a number of things taped, and the main thing that's taped in the right-hand corner here, and has been here since they built the box for me instead of digging a hole, is the Lord's Prayer, printed out. Okay? And I can tell you why that is, but the youth were here when they were like 9 years old, just starting out, that cool youth group that we had, and they were here for sleepover one night, and they were roaming around and doing all the things Reverend Deb used to get them to do. Anyway, they got up here, maybe they're practicing for a drama or something, and one of them yelled out, "Wait a minute, Dave has cheat notes?" Yes, I do. And the reason for that is because we all learn the Lord's Prayer with a different rhythm. It could be cultural, maybe. It could just be one minister who really had a strong voice. Everybody just caught up and followed that, and that became the rhythm of the church. I have no idea why. I remember sitting in the chapel services at Queen's Theological College in Kingston, and there was a retired minister who we just adored. And he always said the word like a half a second later, right? So we'd say, "Our Father who art in heaven." You'd hear him say, "Hallowed be thy name." Just like that, just always as an echo. He had hearing aids and he was just off the pace. Or he was used to leading it and knowing it his way. And the reason I have them printed is because y'all don't talk as fast as Maritimers. I don't know if you know that. But I learned very quickly in Alberta, in my first church out there, that I said the Lord's Prayer quite fast. If I was saying it to myself, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." That's how we would say, "Wasn't that a delightful little lilt? You should all learn it." But you haven't. So I have it typed, because when you break your own rhythm, just try it. Just try it saying faster or slower. You forget the words, because the rhythm connects the next word to the words you just said. We learn that in theater and in poetry reading or recitation, right? So that's why I have the cheat notes up there. Just a little fun thing about the Lord's Prayer. The prayer starts, "Our Father." This is in direct response to the wordy, overly pious worship of the Gentiles. They had many gods. Think of the Romans and the Greeks. They were always stealing gods back and forth from one another and naming them different things. Zeus and Jove and Jupiter and all that kind of stuff. So in response to the wordy prayers of the Gentiles, and I love that Jesus says, because they think for some reason God will listen and favor their prayers because of the use of many words. I wonder where they ever thought, our God really likes a lot of words. Like, I don't know who came up with that. Apollo really likes a lot of words. So pray lots. Go on for a long time. I can't figure that out. But that's what Jesus says the Gentiles have been doing. But he starts it very specifically, and it's actually, you may recognize the original, you recognize the original Aramaic, right? This is the language of Jesus. If you ever wanted to know what it looked like written, it was a Syrian, a form of Syrian Aramaic. It's not a form of Hebrew at all. This is what Jesus spoke when he called out from the cross, when he taught the disciples. Aramaic. It goes that way, I'm presuming. And looks a lot like Arabic. Am I right? Mo? Yeah. I mean, Mo knows it isn't totally like Arabic, but it's got some Arabic look to it. Certainly doesn't look Hebrew. And Jesus taught this way to pray in Aramaic. He didn't choose the language of the synagogue, Hebrew. So it's down to earth. It's a prayer for the people, a mold, a guide for the people. And he starts with, "Our Father." It's a community prayer. It's a prayer that brings the one God to everybody, not one person to the many gods. And, of course, that wonderful word in Aramaic, Abba, which is Father. It's very tender. Daddy, really, we would say. Very tender and very community-oriented. Our Daddy. This one that belongs to us, the one true God. There is simplicity and a claim of relationship that isn't based on fear, like the Gentiles who prayed to other gods whom they were scared of. You ever seen Zeus and his bolts of lightning? Fearful. This is a tender, beautiful way to pray. Our Dad, our Father. There's simplicity. It claims a relationship. It's not a summary of Christian beliefs. Please know that. This prayer that Jesus offered is not everything Christians need to know about faith. It's not a theological prayer. It's a guide. And so when you pray, pray like this. Praise. Mention your dependence on God. Hallowed be thy name. Your will be done. That's dependence on God. Discernment. Forgiveness of our wrongs. Protect us from evil. And give us our daily bread. That's leaning on God. So we have praise, our dependence on God. God is God. We need bread. We need stuff. Please, God. Forgiveness. And protect us from evil. You know I don't always say the Lord's Prayer every Sunday, right? Wayne, I think you and I have talked about that many years ago, I think. I've wrestled with the Lord's Prayer ever since I was 14. Because I remember listening to Matthew 6. And what does Jesus say just before it? Don't pray boisterously and boastfully and extra pious. Pray quietly in your room by yourself. And God will hear your prayer. And then what did we do? We took the prayer that the guidelines, not the prayer, it wasn't a prayer, it was a guideline for prayer, and we use it every single Sunday, and we say it as a big group, 100, 200, 500 people. Right? And for some reason, in my little self-righteous 14-year-old way, I must have been getting ready for confirmation. So I don't feel like praying this out loud anymore because we're not supposed to pray out loud like that in public worship and look all fancy. So I'm just going to pray it quietly in my head, just like Jesus said. It's like we didn't pay attention to what he'd said just before. And then not only that, we added stuff to it. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Because, we're Gentiles. We added to it. We made it fluffy and extra pious at the end. Just like he said we shouldn't do. He made it so simple, and then we made it extra, as the kids would say. And it's a very high energy time, our worship. It's rare that we all say something together at the same time, and so the energy goes up. You can feel it when I'm doing those other kinds of prayers that we're only half listening to, and then I say, as Jesus taught us to pray, and then we all kind of wake up, and we dive in, and the energy goes up, and we all say something together, right? Just like those Gentiles. Some, I would say in the Christian church, this is controversial, some would say that we haven't really actually prayed if we don't finish it off with the Lord's Prayer. It's like the Lord's Prayer makes the other prayers real. I don't know, maybe that's you. It's a good time to disagree with your minister. You can disagree with me on this. Mildred Kaiser certainly did. Mildred, who used to sit back there in the far corner. And Mildred came to me, not on my first Sunday, months before when I came looking for a house. She came up to me, if you don't know Mildred, this is her. She came up to me in the hall at coffee and she goes, I'm Mildred, I'm a spinster and I'm cranky. Just thought I'd tell you because everybody else will, eventually. So let's get that out of the way. She just tuned it right up. Well, she gave me about 6 weeks into my ministry and came up to me just the same way. Mildred's quite a tall woman. She came right up to me face to face and said, why don't you say the Lord's Prayer? What's wrong with you? And I said, I haven't said the Lord's Prayer yet? 6 weeks. I haven't said it yet. I felt like I was about to get fired. And I said, you know what? It just slips my mind, I guess. Well, we should say it. And then she walked away. So guess what? I printed it, I put it on my pulpit, and we started to say it. Not every single week, but many, many weeks. I actually wait to see if it kind of fits with the end of the prayer. Depends on where we're at in our prayer. And I do love it in some ways because it's a binding prayer. It's a true community prayer. We all know it. We know it all across this world. We know it. Someone could start it, and we could continue with them wherever we are. Well, if it's in English, some of us could say it in French and Japanese, but it's a binding prayer. It's the one thing we all hold as Christians in common. But then I don't love it because it's become routine. And for some, it's become an act of piety. But everything we need to know is there. And much of it is followed up in the verses that follow. Now, usually, when we preach this text, the minister will preach a stewardship sermon on where your treasure is, there your heart will follow. Did you brace yourself for a stewardship sermon? But it's interesting, I found out this week, or recognized, that what follows is actually examples of the prayer that Jesus had just lifted up in action. I'll show you how. Let's look at the first slide here. So, our Father, hallowed be in heaven, hallowed be your name, the kingdom come. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, I'm off the screen, where moth and rust consume and where thieves. Right? This note about treasures and clinging to them is opposite to our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your will be done. This is about control and loving the wrong stuff, and this is about loving the right stuff. This is the activity that Jesus says shouldn't happen if you're praying this one. And then the next one is, give us this day, our daily bread. And Jesus says, I love this piece. And whenever you fast, don't look dismal like the hypocrites. He says they screw up their faces. Oh, I'm so hungry. I'm fasting, don't you know? You could see them on the street corners in first century Palestine. No, Jesus says, put oil on your head and wash your face in private so nobody knows what you're doing, but your God knows that you're fasting. It's about need and about control. It's about showiness and nonchalance. Now the next one, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. For if you forgive others, Jesus says, this is what he leads right after the prayer. He says, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. So if we take the model for prayer, and we're still I forgot to say, we're still in the Sermon on the Mount. This is the Beatitudes started it, and we're still, chapter 6, on the Mount. The disciples gathered at Jesus' feet. And if you take the prayer and then read what happens after, Jesus is giving models for where we are right and wrong in our use and our living out of that prayer. It's the activity of the prayer that Jesus wants to connect us to. I got to thinking when I looked at each of those pieces of the prayer. When you look at it carefully, Jesus asked us to pray 3 things. Do you remember what they are? I taught them to the kids about 2 years ago. The 3 things we should pray only. Thank you, we're sorry, and help us. Those 3 things are all that's in that prayer. Thank you, praise, you're wonderful, God. God is God. Thank you. Praise, wow. We're sorry. Forgive us our debts. We forget those. And help us. Bread, keep us from the evil one. Thank you. Sorry. Help. That's it. It's all there. Keep it simple. Don't go on and on like those hypocrites. Don't add stuff to it. God already knows all the details. But our hearts need us to say those other 3 things in order to break open to all the details that God has in store for us. Yeah, how many of you stopped praying because you were nervous about what you should say and shouldn't say? Right? There's no rules. Or if there are, they're just right there on that one page in Matthew 6. Thank you. We're sorry. Help us. We've lost touch with the meaning of this prayer. I guess that's what's always bugged me. We say it and we just go right through it, slow, fast, however. We've forgotten its activity, its call to us to live it out as well. Do we really want God's will here on earth? I looked it up again. You can type in, Our Father, yes. Just type that into Google, Because there was an old skit years ago in the 60s and 70s. Youth groups used to do it. There'd be the person praying, "Our Father," and then this voice, "Yes," over the microphone. "Hallowed be thy name." "Yes." "Wait, who is that?" "Well, you called me, you were talking to me." It goes on like this, and it's a conversation between God about all of these things. Do we really want God's kingdom here on earth? What have we done to give into that will? Do we really believe God is the great provider of daily bread and everything else we need? When was the last time we gave up control of everything or anything? And I hate to ask, but how's our forgiveness going? That's what we should ask each other as we go by on the street. Good morning, good morning. How's your forgiveness going? Well, I'm trying. Are you forgiving others? Well, we thought about it. We've prayed about it. We've said it like 852 times in our life to God, but we find it hard. It's the activity of the prayer, what it stirs in us, what it asks of us while we are asking of our God. That is most important. Prayer is a relationship. Got the Mother Teresa up here? Oh, yeah. Prayer in action is love. Love in action is service. We shouldn't have prayer without activity, without intention, without relationship, without covenant, without a treaty with our God, where we say, we're praying, and we'd like this, and we're sorry, and now we're going to do some stuff about it as well. If you could get on it, we'll get on it too. It's like a deal in some ways. It's the activity of prayer, the relational nature of prayer. And it's what we're asked to do and to live by Jesus. When you pray and when you live, do it like this. May it be so. Amen.